Hey, what's up guys? John here. What does Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and nearly every governor have in common? Well, they're all working together behind the scenes to completely restructure and change U.S. housing, building codes. Things are changing in a dramatic way. It's happening behind the scenes. It's getting essentially zero press. No one's talking about this. But if you are a landlord or you plan to be, pay very close attention to these changes because this is going to completely overhaul the U.S. housing market. I'm going to break it down for you with verifiable facts, show you what's really going on. If you want to hit the like button, that's great. YouTube will share the content, educate other people about what's really going on. And if you want to fix your credit, we'd love to help you at my company, GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com. If you have late payments, medical bills, charge-offs, foreclosures, bankruptcies, repossessions, any negative item, any derogatory item on your report, don't let it sit there. One late payment can sit on your report for upwards of 7 years from the date in which it was filed. And a bankruptcy could sit on there between 7 and 10 years depending on the bankruptcy that you filed. Don't let these situations get in the way of a bright future. Go to GreatCreditFast.com to help clean up those situations and put yourself on the fast track for success during these uncertain times. Take a look at this. So in New York, offices and basements, New York hopes to build 100,000 homes. And how are they going to be doing this? They're going to be repurposing commercial property. So when you look at locations like LA, San Francisco, New York City, where it was very challenging to be a landlord, it was very challenging to be an operator of these office buildings because of the strict regulations and the closures and everything that was going on. And so this puts these operators in a very challenging position because they're going to have to refinance. Many of them are going to have to refinance in 2024, 2025, and 2026. I mean, you're talking $2.7 trillion worth of loans have to get refinanced in the next 3 years. That's 1 out of every 10 properties in America will have to go through this. So we're walking into a problem here, and we're going to be walking into a situation where even the ones that don't have to refinance are still dealing with increased insurance and taxes and falling rent. So there's going to be a lot of stress in commercial real estate, and this is going to push a lot of this rezoning action that's going to be happening. Now, this is only stage 1 of the situation. When you look at what Bill Gates and what Bezos are doing, it's unbelievable. So here's how this is going just in New York City. They want to get rid of all parking requirements for new buildings, right? They want to stack and pack in New York City. That's what the intent is, stack and pack. In LA, they want to build California, they want to build 2.5 million housing units in the next 6 years. How are they going to be doing that? A lot of this is likely going to be the same exact thing, repurposing commercial property, repurposing strip centers, storage units, repurposing everything that they can think of, repurposing and getting rid of parking requirements because ultimately they do not want cars, right? They want to get rid of as many cars as possible. So removing parking requirements is very crucial. If you look at downtown LA, they want 800,000 new units. This is just downtown LA, 800,000 units in the next 6 years. And look, Riverside County, they want to add 40,647 new homes. In Manteca, they're on track for 101,000 residents by 2030, thanks to new housing market dynamics. Right? Newsom was initially talking about 3.5 million housing units. So you're going to have all this migration that's going to be happening. And look, LA is even looking to buy. They were, as of 2 years ago, looking to buy 10,000 housing units. At that time, right after this article was released, Newsom said that they purchased 6,000 units. So they're aggressively buying, and they're doing it through Project Roomkey and all these different quote unquote actions to help homeless people. But we all know that things might be a little deeper than the headline. So look at what's going on here. So this kind of gives you an idea of what cities are going through this and that are going to be following these very similar procedures. So you have Miami, you have New Orleans, you have Houston, you have Austin, you have Phoenix, you have LA, you have San Francisco, you have Portland, you have Seattle, right? Chicago, DC, Philly, New York City, Boston. All of these cities are moving in the same exact direction. And they're going to be doing this through a couple actions. It's very fascinating. So they're going to start issuing these requirements on these property owners to bring these properties up to code. So in an environment where they're going to increase a lot of supply to the housing market, rents are already starting to soften because of a few moving variables. One is that we're seeing more new homes, more apartments come on the market now than we've seen in the last 50 years. So this whole story about a massive housing shortage, there's going to be a huge block of rental housing coming on the market. So as a lot of rental housings come on the market and they're bringing These local governments are bringing a lot of rental units on the market, and the job market's starting to soften. You have 40% of all mortgages were taken out between 2020 and 2021. A lot of these people that, we're stepping into a situation in the labor market where $2 trillion in corporate debt has to get refinanced in 2024. You're going to start seeing a lot of people lose their jobs. They have these 2-3% mortgages. They don't want to let these properties go. They're going to rent them out. You're just going to start seeing a lot more people renting out their homes, drawing down the price of rent. So if you are a real estate investor that purchased a multifamily property at a 4 cap or a 5 cap, and rents continue softening like they already are now, imagine what it's going to look like in an environment where interest rates continue to rise, taxes and insurance continue to rise, and rents are falling. It's going to be a big problem. And then on top of that, they're doing this. So they want to implement and enforce building energy regulations and mandatory, not optional, mandatory performance standards on existing buildings, including measures to reduce embodied emissions in buildings with benchmarking and whole life cycle emissions. And so they're talking about adding, look at how many units they're talking about adding. So they say by 2025, they're going to need to build 1 billion new housing units. That's ridiculous. But they put out these really, really big numbers, as we all know, and then they push it back a little bit. They'll say, okay, not by 2025, by 2035 or 2040, right? But we need to start getting on this path of adding, X amount of millions of units per month. And they're going to start doing that. About 60% of buildings that will exist by 2050 haven't been built yet. This means constructing a city the size of Stockholm or Milan every week until 2050, or the city the size of Singapore or New York every month. Now, just for credibility standpoint, because you might not know what this website is, if you look at funders and partners, you can see some really, really big names here, like UK government, Federal Ministry of Environmental, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety. The names, right? L'Oreal, Hewlett Foundation, Oak Foundation, IKEA. You have George here. Everybody knows George. You have FedEx. You have all the big names. This is not a fly-by-night operation. You have Hillary here. You have World Bank. So this is a very reputable, very powerful group of organizations. And so even if you just look at leadership, you can look at some of the big names that I'm sure a lot of people are aware of. So here's one. We can go to funders and let's see, our leadership. We can go to the board of directors. You can see Bloomberg right there, board of directors. So you get the idea. So that's what they're pushing for. They're going to be pushing to force essentially a lot of these energy upgrades at a time in which rents are falling and cost of being a property owner are going to only continue to increase, which I think could actually paint a massive opportunity for real estate investors that are able to go in there and buy these deals based on the new reality that's coming to the housing market, not the that euphoric type of real estate environment in 2020, 2021 when everyone was talking about, inflation is going to be the big problem. You have to borrow as much money as you possibly can at 2 or 3% adjustable, and then acquire these assets because rents are going to naturally grow at 20 to 30% a year, and then you're just going to be able to print money. That situation, that dynamic, that's not going to be long lasting, and that's going to, I think, push a lot of real estate investors out of the business. But as this is also happening, you have the White House blueprint for the Renters' Bill of Rights. So they're going to be pushing forward a lot of policies to quote unquote protect tenants, making things even more expensive and costly for landlords. Here's an example. They want to have clear and fair leases. That's by their definition, not by the landlords and the tenants' definition. So clear and fair leases is going to do a couple things. It's going to issue education, allow tenants to know their rights, the newfound rights, enforcement, enhancement of rights, essentially giving them access to free legal counsel, very similar to what you see in Los Angeles or New York City or San Francisco. The right to organize, essentially tenants can go on strike in a building. So if you have a 10-unit building and you have a problem or two with one or two or three of these tenants, they could get the other tenants together and they can organize against you. The right to eviction protection, so the tenant can get protection from evictions. Sounds very familiar, like an eviction moratorium. Diversion relief, all of these different policies. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can easily Google it. You can read it right on the whitehouse.gov website. Also, they are looking to reduce the homelessness by 25%. They have a goal of reducing homelessness 25% by 2025. In these locations, Chicago, Dallas, LA, Phoenix, Metro, Seattle, and the entire state of California. So this is very interesting. I think the only way in which they're going to be doing this is making things much harder to evict, pushing and putting more pressure on landlords. But things start to get really interesting here because a bill came out and said Republicans For climate, it's gold, right? Because they want to politicize this conversation. Everything's about politicizing. Everything's about dividing and conquering. So they say that this is, this is gold. But then if you look at this, this came out, Microsoft and Bezos are backing this startup that aims to retrofit millions of old buildings with green energy. So you're like, that sounds really interesting. Almost reminds me of what they said right here when they said that, they want to implement and enforce building energy regulations and mandatory performance standards on existing buildings. So when you look at this, it says right here, we're going to decrease the amount of oil and gas and fossil fuels that these buildings consume, decrease the amount of emissions that are created. We're going to save the building owners money, and hey, you can actually make it a 10% return, right, by investing in these buildings. They say that Block Power leases the equipment for 10 to 15 years, and after enough money has been taken in to pay back the investors and for Block Power to collect its fees, the ownership of the equipment will be transferred to the building owner. That's very nice of them. But Jeff Bezos says they also got $5 million grant from Bezos Earth Fund to digitally map out 125 million buildings across America. So he voluntarily spent $5 million to digitally map out 125 million buildings in America because he's just such a kind and great man. I don't know. It's possible that could happen. Or maybe not, right? You have to always look at both sides. One thing could be true. Maybe he's just giving all of this free information to all these building owners. Another could be maybe they're going to give it all this information to the building owners. Then in the beginning it might be optional. Then there's going to be tax incentives and bonuses and benefits for people to do it. And then the people that don't do it, maybe there could be small little fines or carbon taxes or whatever it may be. Who knows, right? We're gonna learn together. But if you look at some of the big names, you got Salesforce. Then in January, got a big infusion from Microsoft, bringing the total funding to $100 million. So I think it's definitely worth looking at, especially when you consider the fact that you look at a place like Ithaca, New York, they've already signed on, and nearly the entire city is going to be net zero by 2030, so in 6 years, right? And how is this getting funded? It's very fascinating. Private equity investors are actually, what they're doing is lending money to property owners and taking a lien on the property, and the property owner, the money in which they save from utilities and fossil fuel consumption through solar, they're paying a monthly fee to the private equity firm. So the private equity firm gets the loan secured and protected against the asset, and in the event that the owner defaults on that loan, then they're protected because they can go in there and foreclose on the asset. So it's very interesting to pay very, very close attention to this. When you see things like, Mayor Adams saying they want to build 100,000 houses, and you see, Los Angeles talking about or California talking about 2.5 million housing units by 2030, you just have to think, rents are not going to continue to increase. People think, and I've heard this many times before, people are like, oh no, rents are going to continue to rise. How? How are rents going to continue to rise? Wages have fallen 3 years straight. Right? Wages have fallen 3 years straight. You have a situation where inflation is getting out of control. People are going to prioritize food. They're going to prioritize survival over paying their landlords. There's going to be a lot more inventory. People are going to have no other option but to save money on rent. Right? You're going to see a lot of people leaving the space of being a property owner, going to renting if it means they're going to be able to reduce their overall expenses. You're just going to see a lot more inventory hit the market, and it's going to be a lot harder for real estate investors that have extreme leverage to be able to survive. What do you think about this? Do you think we're walking into the greatest real estate investing opportunity of all time? I think so. I think it's going to be greater than 2008. Drop below, hit the like button, add me on IG. And if you want to fix your credit, we'd love to help you. Add my company, GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com. If you have late payments, medical bills, charge-offs, foreclosures, bankruptcies, repossessions, any negative item on your credit report, do not let it sit there. Go to GreatCreditFast.com, book a free strategy session below this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.